And welcome to Full Disclosure, a podcast project conceived to let me spend more time with interesting people than I would ever get on the radio. That's certainly true this week. Michael Lewis, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Author, journalist, former Londoner, but also a producer of such prodigious amounts of work that it's quite hard to know where to start, and important probably at the beginning to acknowledge that there's no way we'll cover everything.
That's fine. I don't want to cover everything.
No,
I lived it once. Why do I want to go back and do it all over again?
It struck me there's a touch of the Cassandras to some of your work, the prophet whose warnings went unheeded.
Maybe a bit. I don't think of myself that way.
You don't?
I don't think of myself as actually actively trying to predict anything. I think of myself just the opposite. I think of myself as someone who is very suspicious of people who predict the future. And Cassandras are implicitly sort of predicting the future, right?
Yes.
And I think of myself, if anything, it's sort of someone very hyper-focused on the present. And sometimes that leads to something that looks like, predicted the future.
Or the reader derives from your work a warning about the future.
That's right.
Which is...
That's different.
Yeah, it is different, isn't it? But yeah. I mean, it's in a way, I don't know what the timescale was for the new book, Who is Government, which you've collated a bunch of columns designed to stress the hard work and dedication of people who are very unfairly maligned in public service, something that holds true on this side of the Atlantic at least as much as on yours. Yeah. And the chronology alongside Elon Musk's rise and the kind of tyranny of Doge it's hard to believe it's a coincidence at times.
Well, but this is funny. So it's what is it? It's 8 portraits basically of federal workers, 2 by me and 6 by writers I really loved. And I generated the thing. I asked the writers to do it and parachuted them into the government. Just told them to find a story. We did this from kind of roughly last May to last November, and it was designed so a year ago,
Yeah.
And it looks prescient,
yes.
Right? It looks like they saw that the federal workforce was going to be under assault, and they were providing a kind of inoculation, or they're trying to teach the people about what these people actually did, as opposed to what Elon Musk said they did. I had no idea that Trump would actually follow through on his promise to hire Elon Musk to be head of something called Doge. I mean and because Trump himself could care less about it, and so it was surprising to me. Yes, it was clear that just generally our government has been under assault as opposed to our politicians. The people who are actually doing things in the government have been kind of misunderstood, neglected, maligned, whatever, for a very long time. But what actually honestly attracted me to it was none of the above. That made it possible the material would be of interest to the reader, that it would electrify the material, the kind of controversy around it. But the truth is that I'd gone in once before during Trump 1, the first Trump administration, and written a book about the federal government called The Fifth Risk,
yes.
And was so shocked, so shocked by the quality of the characters inside the government, who themselves didn't think of themselves as characters, but anybody watching them would say, that is something I want to write about, that I knew I was going to come back to it just for the quality of the material.
Why do you think you were so shocked?
Because you think of them as boring.
Yeah.
You know, you don't know it's just this faceless, impersonal enterprise, the government. And what are they doing and who are they? You never hear. So you assume you never hear because it's not worth hearing about. In fact, you never hear because there are some reasons why people don't want you to know about them. But the federal government, anyway, the United States federal government is, for all its flaws, this miraculous institution. If you think about the things it has done and generated, the internet, global defense, whatever it is, going to the moon, it's filled with people tackling problems and people managing risks that the private sector won't tackle or manage. And the risks, there are the hardest problems. And there are a million of them. And the kind of people who are doing that are basically a collection of experts, people who are particularly obsessed with some problem. And one of the first qualities of a great character is obsession. It doesn't almost matter what they're interested in. If they're so interested in it, it seems incredible, then you can get the reader interested in it. Anyway, I didn't see that until I got up close to it.
Right.
And I didn't see, what what did I didn't realize just how important the stuff that was going on inside the government was. You know, you sort of take it for granted. It's sort of like your parents. Like the American population is like a 13-year-old boy, and the government is like the parents. And the 13-year-old boy has nothing nice to say about his parents. But if parents disappeared tomorrow, it would be traumatic. It really is almost exactly like that. Our society is dysfunctional right now because of this misunderstanding. And because of this misunderstanding, politicians are able to get up, like Trump, like Elon Musk, and say stuff about the government that's so obviously untrue. Like, I don't have an axe to grind here. I've just been wandering around and talking to people. It's so different from what is actually going on, and people won't challenge it. So that's the beginning of a literary opportunity. That's the government. The book starts with that. It's a literary opportunity.
And the key distinction is probably between faceless and selfless, isn't it? Because the people that you're exploring are selfless.
That's another thing. We are kind of hardwired now in my country to assume everybody's sort of out for themselves. It's getting to be a more and more selfish place. It's not a completely selfish place.
Sure.
I mean, it really isn't. You know, the philanthropy in America.
I believe you.
I don't know. It's if all you see is a narrow slice of Wall Street, Hollywood, whatever, you might think that. But even there, I mean, it's extraordinary, like the acts of philanthropy that go on in America. It's got the society has basically a good heart. It has trouble getting its mind around. Basically around the character who's making 1/5 of what he can make in the private sector, because he's so interested in the problem, and the only place you deal with the problem is in the government. That character gets neglected. It's almost the mirror image of the really rich person who's not interesting at all, and not really interested in anything but himself, who gets lots of attention just because he's really rich, and everybody assumes, oh well, he's globally interesting because he's rich. These people are the mirror image of that. They don't have any money. They're never going to make any money. They're never going to get any attention or fame, and yet they are wildly interesting. And our society is so hardwired to give a lot of attention to the former, and doesn't really know what to do with the latter. So again, like literary opportunity. So it wasn't. This is all my way of saying it looks like I basically predicted Doge.
Sure.
If you'd have asked me this time last year, I think what I would have said is, yes, Donald Trump, if he wins, which I don't think he will. So I gotten that wrong. That I would have said he doesn't care enough about the federal government to destroy it. So I can't imagine why he would do it. So I think that's what I would have said. But I would have said we have a longer-term problem than Donald Trump.
Of course. And he and Musk couldn't have done it without the context that you've established of mistrust and undervaluing and not noticing, really, the importance of the work that these people do. What were your feelings as you watched it unfold? Because it's the worst-case scenario in a way. It might help promote the book, but as
Is this a roundabout way of asking me if I'm taking secret pleasure in the dismantling of my society?
No, it's not, because I know that you're not. I mean, it would be impossible to read any of your work and conclude that there'd be any Schadenfreude at all involved in this sort of unraveling or dismantling. But you were in a close to unique position to be fully aware of the scale of the wrongness as it unfolded.
Yeah. So what were my feelings? What are my feelings? Because it's still going on. It's just a little less public now that Elon Musk isn't prancing around the television every day. but it's it's a bit like. Did you ever read Lord of the Flies? You remember when Piggy gets tossed off the side of the cliff? His glasses get ground up. It feels like that. It feels like the bullies have rolled in and destroyed something sweet and good-natured, and that the society's gotten so vicious. It's tolerating a kind of cruelty that just makes it causes your whole body to kind of tense up, and it's the ugly moment is what it feels like. So there's that on the personal level. It's sort of that. There's an existential dread that it's. If you ask me what's going to happen because of this, like what are the bad things, I don't know exactly what, but one way to frame the U.S. government is as manager of a portfolio of risks. And we're, pretty obviously not managing them as well as we could, and it's getting worse every day. So it feels like a bit like someone has run around a bomb factory lighting a whole bunch of fuses, and it's very hard to see how far it is, how long the fuse is, so how long it will take, or which bomb will explode. that the fuses are all kind of tangled together, and but it feels like a lot of fuses have been lit, and there are little things that are already happening that people aren't paying that much attention to. But here's a telling one. Well, a few weeks ago in Kentucky, there was a tornado. It ripped through town and people didn't get their tornado warnings that they might have expected to get, and a bunch of people were killed. It turned out the reason they didn't get their tornado warnings is DOJ had fired the people who actually blasted those warnings out. And oddly, like, you would have thought that would be a major news event, like, oh, this is the consequence. It's not how it played. It's sort of like, oh, that's unfortunate, as opposed to they killed those people.
Why is that happening?
Why is it interpreted that way?
Well, yeah, why is
it's a really good question. I think it's partly the way we're wired, that when something doesn't happen, it's harder to imagine that, oh, it should have happened. When something does happen, if you get caught, I don't know, stealing money from the federal government, that's very easy for everybody to get worked up about. You see them doing it. When it's a kind of neglect, it's hard. I think it's just harder for people to imagine, oh, that wouldn't have happened if. I don't think people make that leap. And it also happened in a part of the country that voted for Trump, and they're very slow to want to think these thoughts. Like, I got killed because of Donald Trump. This very slow. So it's predisposed. It's a kind of willful blindness. But I imagine more things like that happening. And the question is, like, at what scale? And at what point do people say, oh, wait, if we had a government, that wouldn't happen?
Yeah. And if the cruelty is the point, then there's not that much analysis to do.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing.
Yeah.
I don't think the cruelty towards the people who were killed by the tornado would have been the point, but you never know, actually. The cruelty towards the public sector workers is definitely the point. That Trump, just as a political animal, has got this talent for stoking anger. And so you stoke the anger, the grievance, and then you identify the group who you can sort of plausibly maybe say, or maybe not so plausibly, but plausibly to your audience, say they're responsible for this grievance you have, and then you slake the anger with acts of cruelty, and he's gotten 3 groups so far that he can do this to. It gets broader, but it's trans, it's immigrants, and it's federal workers. Very odd 3 groups who he seems to be able to do whatever he wants to, and everybody goes, yeah, do more. The impulse to do this, of course, it's insatiable. Like, that eventually they're going to run out of trans people, and they'll move on to Jews or liberals, or people who live in blue states, or whatever it is. But it's that cruelty clearly is like a feature of the administration. The thing that's it's so curious is, you can kind of, if you'd imagined an autocrat rising in America and needing an outgroup to beat up, you can imagine immigrants. That's not that hard.
Sure.
I mean, they're an easy target. You can imagine trans people, or whoever is sort of whatever the edge of gender, or the awakening. Kind of hard to imagine civil servants.
Yeah.
It's because they're working for him, basically. It's a very odd choice of a target, but it's worked. And it's worked in part because the American people are sort of so out of touch with their government, they don't know what it does.
And if they're unhappy with their lot, then anybody who's had agency in governing is probably an easier target than we might acknowledge.
And we conflate politics and government. So that if you might really be more justifiably angered at Congress for foisting some unpleasant task upon a bureaucracy that can't do it properly because it's ill-designed, or you haven't designed or you've put rules into the bureaucracy that make it hard to function. The people who are actually in the bureaucracy aren't really responsible for that. They're on the receiving end. And it is true. I mean, I don't think this is actually what the American people, when they think about the government, get all angry about. But it is true that, like, it's bizarrely structured, and it's not structured to be efficient. It is true that Elon Musk could have done some really good things. He could have made it easier to fire people, and easier to hire people, and easier to promote people, easier to run it, easier to, like, the fact that it gets budgeted every year, and the budget is you never know what it's going to be. I mean, who can run an organization like that? So there are lots of the fact that, I mean, this is a weird thing about our government. It's not so true of yours. Our government has 4,500 managers. The top layer of management is replaced every administration,
Yes, of course.
at least every 4 years, and often within administrations. What organization is going to run well if every, say, 2.5 years, you're swapping someone new in who knows nothing about the organization, right?
Yeah.
So there's a hopelessness to the way it's structured, but it has nothing to do with the people who are in it.
You said a moment ago the most interesting people are obsessed. What are you obsessed with, Michael?
I do obviously have a need for story. I wonder how much I've cultivated this in myself. I wouldn't have thought I was that way when I was 15 years old. But I've done it. It's been such a almost addictive interest of mine, finding things in the world that get me so excited I want to write 250 pages about them. That's an obsession. It's finding, and it's a weird obsession because it isn't like I don't know what the story is going to be, and it moves around a lot. But that feeling of being in a situation where I've got to make sense of it in the form of a story, and I get wholly absorbed and wholly immersed. I'm obsessed with being in that situation for sure. And then I have moving obsessions. I have an ordinary one.
Can you have a moving obsession?
Yeah,
Is it
no,
still
no,
an
no,
obsession?
No, I mean, like, so here's an example. Here's why I was thinking. I added that word. So I do have obsessions with like sports teams.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. And the Oakland A's became an obsession even before I wrote Moneyball.
Yeah.
And they were the team at the center of Moneyball. But they kind of destroyed my love for them. The owner has sort of walked away from the principles and walked away from Oakland. And instead of just losing the obsession with baseball, which might have happened, but no, what happened instead is it jumped onto the Chicago Cubs.
Right.
Now, how and why that happened, I have an idea, but the point was it needed to find a home. That it wasn't just going to go away. Yeah. So I guess I'm obsessed with certain sports. I think that's probably fair. The story obsession is the oddest.
And is there any unifying theme to the subject matter that draws you most? To the stories that you most want to tell?
I've had people try to explain my books that way.
Yeah.
That they're all connected by something, and I don't find any of it very persuasive because there's always several books. There are always several books that won't fit that description.
Precisely.
But if you made me do it, I would say there is a thing that I keep coming back to, and it's how people get valued. It's how we value people, and that it goes right at the very beginning. Liar's Poker. It's what is animating that whole story is I go to work on Wall Street. I know I don't know anything. I should not be giving people our big institutions financial advice, and yet within 6 months, I'm being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to give financial advice that I know is not worth anything. So what is that saying about a whole industry that gets paid lots of money to do this thing that it probably doesn't know? There's a valuation problem there.
And deserved and undeserved status.
That's right, undeserved status. And so the reverse, these people who is government, the people in Fifth Risk, they're the opposite.
Yes.
And the Moneyball is, what is that? It's if these professional baseball players can be misvalued, and you would think they'd be the easiest human beings in the world to value, and they've been doing the same job for 100 years, who can't be misvalued? The Blind Side, same thing. A boy's valuation changes by moving him from one context to another. The Undoing Project is about two Israeli psychologists, Damon Tversky and Danny Kahneman, who basically are trying to explain the cognitive source of these sorts of misjudgments. Like, what's the brain doing? Why is it making these mistakes? The Big Short. I mean, that was it. The evaluation of everything from the securities to the people who got it right. People who got it right were kind of outsiders, weirdos, not well.
The one's more interesting to you, I think.
Yeah. Well, so another a more prosaic thread to all the work is I really get excited when I find someone who can teach me about something I want to know.
Yeah.
So all the characters are good teachers. They're all, and when you go into the financial crisis, oddly, the people at the center of the financial system, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, the heads of the banks, they didn't know what was going on.
Sure.
There are these other people who did. So they become compelling characters because they understand it.
How does it happen? How do you know? When do your antennae start twitching? When do you start thinking, here's the next one?
God, that's a really good question, because it does happen, and it happens in those moments. So there are two things that happen. One is some general curiosity causes me to collide with some person, and I'm asking them some broad questions about something that interests me, and they say things that surprise me, and I go back, and they keep interesting me, and after 5 meetings, I'm still dying to go back and talk to them because stuff is just coming out of them that I didn't expect. And that's when it starts twitching. It's like, oh, can I draw this person? What are the implications of what they're saying? How big a world can I get to through the narrow prism I entered? It can happen very fast. It can happen in the course of a couple of conversations,
Right.
And it can happen pretty slowly.
Sure.
It can happen. The problem is, I often have a problem. How would you tell a story about this? Not am I interested? I'm very interested. I just don't know how to tell the story.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in climate change. I don't know how to tell a story about it. There are a lot of things like that.
My day job, I'm a radio phone-in host, talkback as you call it in the States. It's the same. Just because it's the biggest headline of the day doesn't mean it's going to make an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
People aren't going to have stories to tell.
That's right. And people aren't going to have stories to tell, and it's just hard to see the shape of it.
Yeah.
Or how to. I would love to find a story about climate change.
Did you see Kyoto? Have you seen the play Kyoto?
I have not.
That's the story about climate change.
Okay.
Yeah. Just a quick recommendation.
Well, so Don't Look Up wasn't bad.
No, that was pretty good as well. Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
It can be done.
Yes.
It's just hard. So yeah. But I do when I get into it, I start to get when I realize I've got something. It's like a fisherman who's got this pull on his line, and it's like, it's 5 times bigger than anything you went fishing for. That's that feeling.
And that never gets old.
Never. It never gets old, and it's always different.
Yes.
It's no two fish are the same. So that that's why it never gets old.
I'm glad you rattled through some of the bibliography. I should have done that at the beginning. People will be familiar with the books that were made in. Well, I'm working on the presumption that everybody listening to this already knows who you are. But for anyone who didn't, that was helpful, including some of the ones that have been made into movies. But before that, you mentioned 2 things. You mentioned being 15 years old, and you mentioned baseball, which is probably not a coincidence for amateur psychologists listening to this conversation. So we'll circle back to the new book and go to the beginning. Something you said, it was your New Orleans upbringing. It was a place where you were so clearly defined by who your mama was. I was born on third base, but you don't add that line. But you thought you'd scored a triple. You knew you hadn't scored a triple.
No, I was born on third base, and I was very aware that I was born.
Which is rare, and probably explains why when you got to Wall Street, you had the self-awareness to know that you weren't really providing any value for money.
Yeah. I wasn't. I don't think I was alone in the realization that what I was doing wasn't all that valuable. I think I felt secure enough to think to voice it. That one way to respond to, they're giving me lots of money even though what I do is not valuable, is to be very, very quiet about it and just take the money, right? And I mean, the truth is that...
Just wait for the tap on the shoulder.
Yeah, but the truth is I was raised with, not in a really rich family, but a well-to-do family. And so I never knew material deprivation. And so I wasn't all hung up about like, where am I going to get my next meal? So there was a kind of freedom in that. And it is true that it's an old-fashioned idea, but it was hammered into me from a very early age. The one way I could piss off my parents, the one way they would get angry, is if I wasn't recognizing noblesse oblige. That even as a little kid, if I wasn't recognizing that I had some greater duty because I had more given to me. They trained me that way. And I could see that there was no pretense that I deserved in some abstract way the hand I was given at birth.
It's a denial of serendipity, really. People who swim the other way, they sort of think that there's some God-given grace they have that
It's a common thing too.
it's incredibly common. I think you're rare.
I don't know how rare I am, but it is very common when you've had a lot of success to attributing it to yourself and yourself alone.
Your unique set of skills.
Your unique set of skills, or your hard work, or whatever.
Yes.
And among other things, it's a really unhappy way of going through life, because if you do that, you're implicitly sort of shelving gratitude. It's like, I don't have anything to be grateful for. I deserve this. I earned this.
Yeah.
I'm me. I'm important. I did it all by myself. It's so joyless.
And we're back to the conflict between deserved and undeserved status.
Yeah.
I mean, it is essentially the bedrock of.
Oh, I think that's right. I think that's right. I think New Orleans, it's got its problems, but one of its charms is that it arbitrarily bestows lots of undeserved status upon people, and they're aware of it. And it does it through Mardi Gras. The social structure of New Orleans is carnival organizations, and there are 70 of them. There are a lot of them, and there's several of them that are kids organizations that mirror the grown-up organizations that you're made a king when you're 15 years old, so a lot of people have the experience of being king for a day or duke for a day, and you laugh and you think, oh, but they're actually treated. They're treated as if, and they sort of half believe it.
So you can just taste enough.
You can taste enough, but to laugh about it.
Yeah,
You'd be absurd if you.
Started knighting people up.
But if you are king of carnival, for example, there's a flag they give you, a big flag that you're supposed to hang outside your house every Mardi Gras. So when people walk by their house, they know, oh, he was a king.
He was a king.
So there's a genuine status to it, but you understand that it was just given. You didn't earn it. You didn't become king because of anything you did. So you hold very loosely just the idea of status, and that's true across the society.
That's really
and anybody who was really assertive about, and these people do exist even in New Orleans, about their status would be widely frowned upon.
Okay.
So you don't get to be Elon Musk in New Orleans.
Got it.
You don't get to be that person. And I think so I was raised in that environment, and it's a lovely attitude to take into the world where, you're king all year. Where if you make it on Wall Street, you're king of Wall Street.
Sure.
That if you hold that loosely, you're much better off than if you hold it really tightly.
Well, not least because it gives you the confidence you'd need to walk away from somewhere like Wall Street.
That's right. There's no question that that my sensitivity to undeserved status is partly wired into me by being part of this New Orleans social scene.
That's absolutely fascinating. It's a corrective to whether you want to call it the divine right or just entitlement. It's a healthy corrective to that. But I mean, the privilege was pretty impressive. You've got presidents in your family tree.
Yes, James Monroe on my mother's side. My middle name is Monroe, and this I haven't confirmed, but my father he doesn't lie, and he's very smart. Tyler, I think on my dad's side, we have Meriwether Lewis.
On the explorer.
But it was so the connection, the interesting family history, the direct connection is Thomas Jefferson, when he bought Louisiana from Napoleon, sent Joshua Lewis, who is great-great-great-grandfather, direct, down to be the chief justice, the first chief justice of the Supreme Court of the whole territory. So all the early legal opinions are written by him, and his son was the mayor of New Orleans. And so my roots there, they go, to the French, the Creoles who were there, the original French settlers, they're still there, a lot of them. Well, the families are still there. They regard someone like me as an Arab East. But we've been there since 1803. and my whole family's there. Like very few people have left.
So as you make your way through school, then what is expected of somebody, of you, or somebody like you? Has the map been plotted given your background and your family?
So what is expected? As I say, very little other than don't be obnoxious about your
don't be a dick.
Yeah, don't be a dick. It's like a no asshole rule. Don't be that guy.
Yeah.
But there are some social expectations that are kind of funny. One is I was actually made king of the big Mardi Gras kids ball, and that in the moment does not seem like a trivial thing. 5 people in black tie show up your door at 3 p.m. with a crown and an ermine cape and tell you have responsibilities for the next year to learn how to be a king, and you're going to perform in the municipal auditorium in front of thousands of people. And when I was, so this happens when I'm 15, I was actually trotted off, after school, after actually baseball practice every day. I was trotted off to a small house where there was a woman, an old woman, who had come from Eastern Europe where she had trained actual royals. That turned out to be a dying business. And she came to New Orleans where there was this booming industry in training royals.
Oh, that's
but the fake monarchs,
sure.
Starting with the kids. And so I was taught how to sit on a throne and wave a scepter and walk like a king and receive subjects. And so, it's comical. But I was taught all those things.
It's comical and not comical, isn't
it?
Yeah. Just to sort of complete the circle, you managed to share these experiences later in life with Princess Diana herself, I think.
Oh, that's very funny. So, I have a friend who was a friend of hers. And this was not long, just before she died, invited me, didn't tell me who I was being invited to have a drink with. Just gave me an address in Kensington. I went and rang the doorbell, and she answered the door.
Oh, fantastic.
It was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying.
It's like that.
I was in a cold sweat.
It's like the Notting Hill scene when it's Julia Roberts on the other side. It
was a bit like that. Even more shocking.
Yes, of course.
It's Princess Diana, and she was very funny. And I said, so what happened was, I was kind of like stammering for something to say. And what I said was, you and I have something in common. And she says, what? I said, we're both royalty. and she said, what do you mean? And I explained that I'd been made a king and taught how to wave a scepter. And she lit up. She said, they taught you how to wave a scepter? And I said, yes, they taught me how to wave a scepter. She said, would you teach me? And so we grabbed a couple of forks and marched around the living room. It was fabulous. She was very good company. Anyway, so yes. And I'm going to tell you what the punchline of that story really is, that when I went back to New Orleans after that, and I was rattling around with friends, this is, I'm a grown up, but my friends are all there. And I say, oh, I met Princess Diana. I taught her how to wave a scepter. The attitude in New Orleans is kind of, it isn't, oh my God, you met Princess Diana? It's, oh, well, of course you two belong in the same room. You're both royalty. And they're pictures. These pictures, famous pictures that circulate in New Orleans. They're black and white photos of the Duke and Duchess of Windsor actually coming down to New Orleans in the 50s, maybe. Mm-hmm. And there's a meeting of the courts with them and the King and Queen of the Rex Carnival Ball. And I swear to you, in that moment, the King and Queen of the Rex Carnival Ball think they're on equal standing.
Every bit.
I love
that. I love that. That's incredible. The really seminal moment, though, if I've understood your backstory, your origin story correctly, happened on the baseball pitch in 1975. You've written about your coach, of course.
I was 14 years old.
Yeah.
It was a book called Coach. It was but his name was Billy Fitzgerald. He's still alive. He's not coaching anymore. And, I would not have put it this way at the age of 14, but looking back on it, he had this unbelievable gift for dramatizing life for teenage boys and making a baseball game feel more important than a nuclear war. That it was every important thing was jammed into that experience. You felt like life itself turned on the outcome of this game. And he'd put you in positions over and over to fail. Stressful positions. He was not shy about exposing kids to failure. And he did it. I don't think he would have articulated exactly. He had a genius for it. He did it to teach you how to deal with failure. That once you experienced it enough in that kind of high pressurized environment, you realized you could rebound from it.
Yeah.
And then once you could rebound from it, it was no longer terrifying. So you didn't avoid frightening things because you were afraid of failing anymore. And I don't become a writer without this. There's just no way. I certainly don't write the kinds of books. I don't take the risks I've taken. He taught me the feeling of working very hard towards something, of walking onto a stage. I was a pitcher in baseball, so that you were really on the stage. But it was walking onto a stage, performing, having it go really badly, and then very well, and connecting the effort to the outcome, but also connecting like your path through life to this thing inside you, which is fear of failure. Let's not let that have a too big an effect.
Wow.
And it was masterful. And I have teammates who, when I get back together with them, even now, this is 1975, he's who we talk about.
That's incredible.
It's like he was able to get inside kids' heads in the most remarkable way. And when I think about what I do for a living, when I'm sitting there all by myself with a piece of paper or a computer screen in front of me, and I've got the real chance of making an ass of myself in front of the world by what I'm about to do, I think back. I go right to the place. I'm on a pitcher's mound, the ball's in my hand, and everybody's watching. The whole world's watching is what it feels like.
Yes, of course.
And I lose. And it's not. And it's scary, but it's okay. It's scary. Is how it feels.
And there's a specific moment when you smashed it, right? And
well, so but he would have, if it hadn't been that moment, he'd have created another.
Okay.
If that hadn't worked, he'd have put me in another position. But it was, I was coming out of I was not quite out. I was coming in, I guess, to a miserable puberty.
Yeah.
I grew late, and
so you were skinny. You didn't look.
Yeah, I didn't look the part.
Yeah.
I looked 10 when I was 14. I always looked like the other team. The way I looked when I was that age, the other team laughed when I walked on the field. And he brought me into a very stressful situation, and it went extremely well. In the middle of the night in New Orleans with the moths up in the lights, and it seemed like 10,000 parents in the stands, and it was that kind of thing. And afterwards, what he did, he didn't do it when you failed. When you failed, it's okay. We're going to go get this. We're going to go work, and we're going to get better. But when you succeeded, he got the team on the side of the field, after the field. Everybody's throwing their hats in the air and screaming and yelling because we won a big game. And he says, Michael Lewis, you were made for that moment because you're that kind of person. And the power of someone telling you who you are, both negatively and positively,
of course,
at that age, you believe it.
Yeah.
It's baloney. It could have gone really badly.
For sure.
But he creates a narrative. He helped create a very positive narrative. And you become the stories you tell about yourself.
And you determined to become the person he was describing.
Yes.
At this point in your life. I mean, you do see it in Hollywood pivot moment.
It was a pivot moment.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't.
I love that.
I didn't know it at the time exactly. I felt something very powerful, but I didn't know, oh, this is a movie moment in my life. It was more like, yeah, that's who I am.
I got to read you something, because until I read that account of what Billy Fitzgerald did to you, because you come back to school the next term and the headmaster is telling you that Billy Fitzgerald speaks well of you.
The headmaster was in the stands for that game.
It's all there.
Yeah.
It's all there. Script editor might send it back and say this is a bit implausible.
Headmaster they call him a jock sniffer. Headmaster was obsessed with athletes.
So I've been haunted since I was at. Of course, you spent enough time in London for me to be able to say public school and not explain to you what that means in the English context. By Cyril Connolly, the critic who was at Eton around the time, or just before George Orwell, and he came up with something called the theory of permanent adolescence. And that goes, the experiences undergone by boys at the great public schools, their glories and disappointments, are so intense as to dominate their lives and arrest their development. And then he goes on to say that it's why the ruling class in this country remains adolescent, school-minded, self-conscious, cowardly, sentimental, and in the last analysis, homosexual, which is probably a bit of a
stretch.
It's a bit of a stretch these days. But But I see your story of Billy Fitzgerald as an antidote to that, because
Yeah.
you're describing the intensity of the emotions and the feelings being harnessed by somebody really responsible and good, and creating something
And
really
there's
good from the same raw material.
So there's also another important distinction, and the other important distinction is, although I did go to the version of a public school,
Yeah.
and the fanciest in New Orleans, he was not a public school character. He was a street
Formerly
fighter.
of the Oakland A's.
Yeah, he was a
wasn't
street
Yeah.
fighter. He'd come up from the streets, and he had no time for any kind of class distinction. And so he wasn't telling us, "Oh, you're better because you were born to that." No. That was not it.
Deserved status.
It's deserved status. That's right. And he had no time at all for undeserved status.
Wow.
Just the he was. So he. I agree that if you infect boys with the idea that you're at Eton, so you're the best, that's bad. The fact you're at Eton should get you nowhere. And in fact, you should be suspicious of what you achieved because you had the advantage. You started the race 100 yards ahead of everybody else.
You did.
So that there's that was, I think, the important difference there. It made you feel like he made you earn it. He just made you earn it.
So you say.
So let me just add one thing.
Go on.
He was constantly in conflict, especially in later years. But even in my time, it was mild in my time, but it became a huge problem in his life. He was constantly in conflict with the upper class of New Orleans, that the kids of the rich had increasing influence in the school. Money became more important. The rich parents who donated the buildings became more important. And it became, he's making my child uncomfortable. He shouldn't be his coach. And they missed the whole point.
Wow.
And there was a movement to fire him, and it was led by a handful of very rich families. They lost, but that movement occurred. And this is something that's happened in American society.
I was about to say less likely to lose now, probably. That kind of campaign.
You're much less likely to lose now. And the coach would have lost now.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's part of what's going on in our society.
Yes.
So Cyril Connolly's right. He also said, "Whom the gods wish to destroy, they first call promising." Right. So that rhymes with that sentiment.
Yes,
but
it's
when I think about the weird, corrosive things that are going on in American life that lead to our current public life, our current social life, that is among them. And what is at the bottom of that? Inequality. Because back when I was a kid, we didn't have really rich parents. We had some well-to-do parents, upper middle class.
Yes.
And we had some lower middle class and middle class. Now you have these gargantuan fortunes, even New Orleans, and they have this outsized influence on the institution, and it's really bad. It prevents good. It leads to lots of unhappiness for their own children, among other things. So that's one of the things that's going on. Inequality feels to me like one of the root causes of what's going on.
You say you don't think you'd have had the career that you've had if it hadn't been for those moments and the tutelage of Billy Fitzgerald. Would you have got into Princeton? Because I think this is the point when you finally started knuckling down. And
no, I was born to. I had huge advantages getting into Princeton by birth because my father had gone, my grandfather on my mother's side had gone, my great uncle, I had all these relatives who had gone. And it was something of a family tradition to go from New Orleans up to Princeton, and somewhat exotic at the time. The university system has become a truly national system, but kids from the South didn't usually go up east to school. And so I had a leg up with the Princeton admissions committee, but I would two things would have happened had I not met Billy Fitzgerald. I would not have become the student I became. I became a much better student, but I actually was recruited to play baseball, and so and he wrote letters and got in touch with the Princeton baseball coach. Turned out I really wasn't good enough to play at Princeton, but not well, and so but they got me in. The coach put me on a list of people he wanted. So I definitely would have. I thought even when I got to Princeton, even with all these good things that had happened to me. I was probably the last person they let into my class. Everyone else had better test scores, better grades, more serious about academic work, all that.
But you took to it like a fish to water, doing a degree in art and archaeology. If I'd met you then in your freshman year at Princeton and I said, "What do you want to do when you graduate?" What would you have said?
I wouldn't have had an answer.
No clue.
You would
just don't be a dick.
You would have worried about me.
Yeah, okay.
You would have thought one of two things. I'm going to be frank and slightly immodest here. You would have thought one of two things. You'd have thought, because I know what my friends thought. You'd have thought he's going to have a charming and fun life, but it's going to be an unserious life, and he's not going to have like a career in anything. He's not an achiever.
Okay.
But he's going to get a lot of attention. Because I got a lot of social attention at Princeton, and so you might have watched that and you said, "Oh, he's going to go back to New Orleans and he's going to be the life of the party kind of thing." You might have said that. Some people said to me, I can remember even at the time, I had a couple of friends say to me, "I don't know how you're going to be famous, but you're going to be famous." Very odd, right? Mm-hmm. Very odd, because I didn't have any ambition to be famous, or be known in any way. I felt just happy, like I love being a student there. I love the people around me. I was content to be a Princeton student for the rest of my life. And it wasn't till the very end of my time there that I thought, oh, Christ, I've got to go make a living. I've got to go do something. But so I had no obvious path. You probably would have pitied me. You would have enjoyed me in person, but you'd have thought, when we get out, it's not going to go well for him.
Everybody else would have reconvened over there to discuss what jobs they were applying for.
That's right.
And left you on the tennis court.
That's
or whatever
right.
It
That's
was.
exactly right. That's what you. That's
so. What changed?
What changed was my last year to get out. I was required to write a thesis, and it was not a trivial task. It was basically a book. It would be a 180-page book, and I was an art history major, and I was obsessed with art history. And I had a wonderful subject, and it was an original subject, and I had some tools that enabled me to do it originally, and so possibly like almost publishable kind of thing came out of me, and I got so excited by the project that I thought, I just want to do this. I lost track of time while I was doing it.
Right.
And I thought what it meant was I want to be an art historian, and the advisor who ran the department said, they're not going to be jobs. You're not going to do that. I'm going to save you the trouble. Don't go try to be an art historian. And I remember saying to him, well, maybe it means I want to be a writer. What do you think of the writing? And he said, put it this way, never try to make a living at it. But so he discouraged me, but I got into my head that maybe this means I want to write books and so that's what changed. I thought, I want to do this. Let's see if I can do this.
So that's bubbling away in the back.
Right when I get out of school. Not until I get out of school.
But you go into art first. Very briefly.
Very briefly, I go work for the Wildenstein family.
Yeah, wow.
And I'm the stock boy at their New York gallery for 6 months, and then I got tired of that.
Sure.
But even then, I was very aware that experiences could benefit a writer. So
you were collecting?
I was collecting. I was really collecting.
But not art.
No, I wasn't correct. For example, I would go from the very fancy art gallery, which was filled with stories, and there's still material from that experience that I will use one day.
I was just thinking you haven't written that book yet.
I haven't. No. There is a book to be done.
Yeah.
But I go from that to ladling soup at the Bowery Mission and Young Men's Home, not because I'm a good person, but because I thought I was so interested in watching the homeless people come through, and I was learning about the homeless people, and so I was gathering experiences, and in that spirit, I ended up getting a job on Wall Street. I was sort of gathering an experience. I didn't have any reason to believe that one day I would write a book about Wall Street, but I thought this will be however I become a writer, this will be useful.
You've skipped, I think, over the brief sojourn in London. You came to the LSE for a year.
2 years.
2 years to do a master's.
Yep.
So you were serious now?
Yeah, I was serious. I was writing when I got here. I went from Princeton to the art dealership to the LSE.
Right.
And LSE was a 2-year program. First, I had no background in economics, so the first year they put me through the whole undergraduate program, and the second year they gave me the master's. And right when I got here this is where the English, the British gave me my start in journalism. All of my early pieces were for The Economist. I got here, I saw this magazine I never heard of called The Economist. And at the back of it, I think it's still true, in the science pages, they advertised something called the Richard Caseman Internship. And it said if you can write a 600-word piece that's better than everybody else's pieces about something having to do with science and technology, you get a job, I think it was, or at least an internship. So I wrote one, and I got called in. I was on the short list. I didn't know what a short list was. I remember thinking, I got a letter saying, congratulations, you're on a short list from someone named Matt Ridley, who was the deputy editor of Science Pages. And I went in, this was my first year at the LSE, and they knew nothing about me. They learned everything about me in the interview. And he said, it took him about 5 minutes to realize that I knew nothing about science or technology. I'd written this piece. That was it. That's a sum total of my knowledge. And he said he asked me if I'd study what science. And to fulfill my Princeton science requirement, I'd taken a course called Physics for Poets. It was for the dummies. And I flunked. I have an F in Physics for Poets on my Princeton transcript. And so I just was honest with him. I said, what do you mean? I don't have any background. I just wrote you the piece. Didn't say I had to have a background.
Yeah.
And he said that two other people on the short list, one is at Cambridge and one is at Oxford, and they're both doing their PhDs in a science field. And he said, I can remember it. He denies he said this, but he did say it. He said, he started laughing. He said, "You're a fraud." he said, but he laughed. He said, "But you're a very good fraud, and that's a journalist."
Wow.
And he said, we're not going to give you the job.
Right.
He said, but we're going to publish the piece.
Okay.
And you can write for any section. And he introduced me to a guy named Johnny Grimman, who ran the American section. And I wrote I don't know, 24 pieces for The Economist while I was a student. And that gave me clips that got me into other magazines, that got me to the attention of an editor who got me a book contract.
And you knew you were good.
I just didn't know I was bad.
But The Economist isn't going to pick up that amount of work from a grad student unless you're hitting parts that other people aren't hitting.
They thought I was amusing on the page.
Yeah.
But they rewrote everything.
Sure.
They had this
Especially
language.
The Economist.
It was called Economies. They would always keep my first line because they thought it snapped, and then they'd redo the rest of it. But it was, I knew I was good at finding interesting stuff for them.
So when you got to Wall Street, you knew it was temporary?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
You just wanted to, make a pot of money, or?
You could ask me, depending on when you asked me. But 3 months in, I would have said, I'm going to make enough money so I don't have to worry too much about money, and then I'm going to become a writer. That would have been 2 months in. About 8 months in, I realized that if I stayed around long enough to make that much money, I would never become a writer.
This is the tennis lessons principle. So you think you're going to get out, but suddenly you've got to pay for all this stuff, and you can't possibly dial your life back down again to the level that
Precisely.
you can live without that income.
And the way I intuited this is I looked at the people who were 8 or 10 years older than me, and you could see none of them taking the kind of risk that I knew I would have to take.
Yeah.
So I told myself, I'm out of here as soon as I can get out of here. And as soon as it was...
Because you can't hang around, can you? Because
no.
Every month brings you tighter binds, tighter handcuffs.
That's right. And it was... so I lasted... the other thing that was going on is I was really engaged with it, interested in it, like intellectually engaged, for about the first year and a half.
Yeah.
And then it became very repetitive. And I wasn't learning anything. And the minute I stopped learning, I could hardly get myself out of bed to go smile and dial for dollars. And it became miserable. Yeah. And so I was unhappy there. I fooled people. People didn't my bosses did not know I felt this way.
Sure.
But and I was writing at the same time. So I started writing about that. And
this became Liar's Poker.
This became Liar's Poker. Yeah.
Rising through the wreckage on Wall Street, which was, it set the tone, didn't it, really, for what would follow, part memoir, part satire, and crucially telling a story through the eyes, I think I read somewhere, of a bewildered young salesman. I don't know if you were ever bewildered.
Not really.
No, I didn't.
I wasn't really bewildered, but I was detached.
Yeah, and you needed to be.
Yeah, and it was... There was a decision I made early on. And it was a decision, but it was also just a temperamental thing. I knew when I sat down that there would be some audience for a screed, for a rant about the evils of Wall Street that didn't interest me at all. That I was really interested in just this funny story, this picaresque sort of adventure that I'd had, and that was going to be the spine of the book. And once I realized I could pull that off, I then had the joy. I mean, it's a unsettling joy, the joy of watching the audience make what they would of it. Like this huge range of response to the book. No two people exactly the same. People could read it and think that awful things about Wall Street. People could read it and want to go to work on Wall Street. That it created this kind of hole for the reader to walk into. And I wanted to do that again and again and again.
And you have. I mean, it was also a massive hit, a much bigger hit than a debut has any business being.
No, that's right.
In many ways, and that just gives you the freedom to.
At that point. No, it's funny. At that point, it didn't give me I probably did, but I didn't appreciate it.
Right.
It didn't give me the freedom to think, oh, I can go write about whatever I want. The publisher was. They're great, my publisher. Same publisher. I have the same editor.
Really?
Yep. He has Starling Lawrence at W.W. Norton in New York. He started publishing me in 1989, and we're still together. But he would have indulged, but not encouraged me chasing off in some wildly new direction. But I was sort of like encouraged to stay close to finance, Wall Street, business a little bit. Not in my magazine life, but in my book life. And it wasn't until Moneyball that they said, well, it doesn't matter what you write. You can write about whatever you want. They really don't. There's a total indifference to what the subject matter is.
Because you'd reached a Super League with Moneyball.
Because it worked. Yeah. And so it was sort of like that's when I think everybody realized that to the extent that there's pixie dust sprinkled on these subjects, it comes from just my genuine interest. And that if I can get genuinely interested in it, it will become interesting.
And I suppose a book like Who is Government, The Untold Story of Public Service, would not get commissioned at all without a name like Michael Lewis on the front.
Well, think of this. Until very recently, someone walks into your office of the publishing firm and says, I want to write a book about civil servants. No, I mean, I'm sorry. It's like, it would not, on the other hand, it's sold like hotcakes. So there's a market for it.
There clearly is, and also an urgency to it, which, as you say, wasn't planned, but was serendipitous. The other writers, Casey Sepp, Dave Eggers, our very own John Lanchester, Geraldine Brooks, Sarah Val, and W. Kamau Bell. Do you have a favourite, but not including the 2 chapters you wrote?
So I wouldn't have let them see the light of day if I didn't really like them all.
Of course,
but I have a soft spot for what John Lanchester did, because everybody else...
He's the only one who didn't choose a person.
He chose the Consumer Price Index.
Yeah.
And I just love that, because it's sort of like, I'm going to make this as hard as possible. I'm going to interest you in a statistic, and I'm going to tell you why this is important. And he opens up an aspect of the government, a whole side of the government that no one ever thinks about, which is data collection. And it's amazing how much the U.S. government counts. And it's been amazing how important that counting has been. And he shows just how complicated a single statistic is. It's so readable. Yeah. He's like the world's best essayist. Everything he takes on just jumps off the page. So in a way, it wasn't brave of him, because he knew he could do it easily. But
he'd have enjoyed the challenge.
He loved the challenge.
Yeah.
And so that thing, when I saw it, I thought, oh my God, this is just great. It's just great. The inverse of this, and Dave, I've said this to Dave himself, but Dave Eggers, who can make anything fun, he's just great, goes for NASA looking for little green men in space, which is the easiest thing to make interesting. And Geraldine Brooks said, Dave Eggers is not allowed to do that. He's too good. He's supposed to take something hard. Yeah. So Geraldine Brooks, when she saw what Dave Eggers had done, she said, she was angry, and she said, okay, I'm doing the Internal Revenue Service, because that's the hardest thing to make it. Everybody hates them. So she reacted to Dave doing NASA and the search for a life in outer space to doing the Internal Revenue Service.
As you say, it's done all right, and it will continue to do so as the subject matter becomes, actually, as we said at the beginning, with every passing month, it becomes more urgent and more important. Do you have any ambitions left? Because apart from becoming a writer or fulfilling your noblesse oblige, we haven't really talked about boxes that you wanted to tick off or ambitions that you wanted to achieve?
So it's a very vague ambition,
Yeah.
but it's specific and vague at the same time. It's in that not outside the world of writing. I don't want to. I don't want to be an astronaut.
Sure.
I don't want to be a professional baseball player. I don't want that kind of thing. Don't want to run a baseball team. I've really loved when I'm forced to flex different writing muscles. So I've loved scripting a podcast. I've loved being an unsuccessful screenwriter. No, I've been paid to write 5 TV shows, and none of them have been made. One looks like maybe, but it's just maybe.
Sure.
I would love to run a TV show and write it. I would love to write a play. And in fact, I just accepted a commission.
Ooh.
And so it doesn't mean it's ever going to get on.
No, but still.
But moving those muscles it's a bit like cross training when you've been doing the same exercise over and over and over, and when you've been running every day, and then all of a sudden you jump in a swimming pool, and you feel, wow, that feels good, and it makes you a better runner.
Yeah.
You're working the whole body. I have that ambition.
Michael Lewis, thank you.
Thank you. Total fun.